Today we're celebrating and talking about Reconciliation Week. My name's David Rathman and I'm here to host this conversation with young people, elders and some talented Aboriginal individuals. So this morning we're going to talk about Reconciliation Week and what it means. So I'll ask Uncle Frank to welcome us to Kaurna country.
Nai Tampati Tula Brekiana, Nai Tampati Bamba Bayarendi, Kaurna Yurtiana, Mardich Younger Kaurna Miona, Nai Wanganeen Marni Nai Budni, Kaurna Yurtiana, Tandan Younger Wadliana. So what I just said is that first of all, I just want to acknowledge the ancestors and also recognise where we hold in this event is on Kaurna country. And on behalf of the Kaurna people, I welcome you to Tarndanyanga, the place of the red kangaroo. So, I tell you, thank you.
So this morning I just want to welcome Frank Wanganeen, Tamaru, Sasha Hill and Khyeesha as well, who are going to be the main stars of this conversation this morning. So what I'd like to do now is to start to ask you to introduce yourself and talk a little bit about who you are, what you aspire to do and why you're in the world with us today.
Ladies first.
But you're getting the eye then. All right, so hello, thank you for having me here today. My name's Sasha Hill. I'm a Yamaji Noongar woman from Western Australia, but have been lucky enough to live and work and raise babies on Kaurna country for quite some time. I am a social worker by trade. I'm also an artist. And yeah, that's probably all you need to know about me at this point in time.
Nainari Tamaru, my name is Tamaru. I'm a proud Kaurna man. My job predominantly is to teach Kaurna language, Kaurna culture in schools from ELC to universities. Really encouraging reconciliation action plans all over the state. I do them in the public sector, the private sector, and we're trying to get them across schools across the state and loving it.
Hello, so my name is Khyeesha Welgraven. I'm a proud Atyamatthana Kokitha and Arada woman. So currently I am in Year 12 at Kildare College, where I'm also one of the college captains. I'm also completing a Commonwealth Bank traineeship that finishes this year. I'm really enthusiastic about social change and social justice, so empowering others to make a change in the world.
Thank you. That's a nice way to finish the introductions with the future. We're in a beautiful setting here today and it probably reminds you a little bit of what Kaurna country was like before European settlement. National Reconciliation Week 2022 is the theme Be Brave, Make Change, and it's a challenge to all Australians to tackle the unfinished business of reconciliation. Reconciliation is not about us, the Aboriginal people sitting at this table. It's about you watching. The National Reconciliation Week theme, Be Brave, Make Change, is a challenge to individuals, to your families, your communities, organisations and government. To be brave and tackle the unfinished business of reconciliation so all of us can make change for the benefits of all Australians. You probably know that National Reconciliation Week is the 27th of May to the 3rd of June. You probably don't know that it started on a Sunday as a prayer event and then built into National Reconciliation Week. It's a time for all Australians to learn about our shared histories, cultures and achievements and to explore how each of us can contribute to achieving reconciliation in Australia. This year's theme builds on the 2021 theme, which encouraged us all to greater action on reconciliation, and we saw unprecedented responses to our suggested actions for every day and for braver action. action rather than talk, although we're going to be talking a bit today. What I'd like to do is to ask the panel, and doesn't really require anyone to start, but it helps if we get someone starting. Otherwise, I'll nominate you. How does that sound? What I'd like to do is ask that each of you think through this and then comment in your own words as to what reconciliation means for you. Silence is golden.
All right, I'll kick it off, get it over and done with. So one of my main walks in life is repatriation, and I'm on the Ghana, it's not the board, it's the subcommittee about repatriating our elders past back to Ghana country. I've done about 3 of them now where we return our ancestors back to our land, and I've told my child that it's, it's good for our well-being, it's good for everybody's well-being to repatriate. We acknowledge the atrocities of the past, but how do we move forward together? Unfortunately, I've put skulls, I've put legs, I've put teeth, I've put remains on our country, but not the full skeletal remains. You know, I believe, why should I have a skull here on my country and yet the body's back in England in a museum? So my goal is for my daughter and my family to get the full skeletal remains. If we find somebody in Gallipoli that's passed away in the war, they actually bring the whole body back. Well, why can't we bring our whole body back as well? And so through these processes we educate. The last one we did up at the Playford Council area, we buried 120 people back on our country. The Premier came and helped us out and put some remains back on our land. And we had over 2,500 people there that came past and hugged us on the way through. And these non-Aboriginal people said to us, well, really appreciate you having us and thanks for letting us come. Well, we said, actually, it's really good for your well-being as well as ours. We all acknowledge these atrocities and we need to move forward, and the only way we can move forward is through the spirit of reconciliation. And this is why in the education space I love doing RAPs, so reconciliation action plans, on how schools can engage Aboriginal people coming to their site, how we can acknowledge the language on the site, and how we can actually work together. A lot of teachers, a lot of schools are very frustrated. They don't want to offend us. You know, I sarcastically say that you've stolen our land, you stole our kids, you can't offend me anymore. But we need to move forward together. And when we make little tiny jokes like this, it sort of makes it people a bit more relaxing. And I encourage teachers to make a mistake, because we all learn from mistakes. It doesn't matter whether it's a mistake writing my language incorrect or mistakes on how you talk to our people. You know, we really do want to walk side by side with you. You know, when I do my welcomes to country, and I acknowledge I'm on the Ghana land, and thank you Uncle Frank for welcoming me, that, you know, I stand in front of somebody and I say, look, I don't want to walk in front of you, and I stand behind people and say, I don't want to walk behind you. I stand next to them and say, I want to walk side by side with you, because this is the only way we can move forward together. And through these reconciliation action plans is how we do it. So I've done them with government, I've done them with private industry, whether it be hospitals and with the building companies that work on Ghana country. And I really enjoy doing them at schools. I do them at private schools and I do them at public schools. It's just about how we engage each other and how we can move forward together. So, you know, I'm really proud to see a young Aboriginal lady here at the table, because I'm mindful my grandfather told me, my grandmother told me that whatever we do for you. We don't do it for us. You're our hope, you're our foundation, and we want to guide you, we want to help you. You know, we have yarning circles where we have old people, young people sitting around talking with hindsight on how to share knowledge with you guys. And I'm so proud. I just had this really buzz in my heart when I heard that you're the head of school in your school. So how cool is that, an Aboriginal person, the head of the school? You know, you're our shining light. So, you know, by all means, ask questions. We'll share with you. You just make us really proud by what you're doing. I'm sitting next to a lady that is an absolutely awesome artist. She's a bit shy of saying, oh, I'm just an artist. Well, if anybody's seen her work is pretty good. And I was lucky enough one day to do a welcome to country for one of her art exhibitions, and I got to see her work and meet her family again. and realise her dad is actually an awesome bloke. I already knew him. But it's really good to meet young people that are really great at what they do, and you need to immerse in their culture, in their understanding of our art and our language. So that's me. If you're out there, please just talk to us. Get a rap program happening. You can do little things, deliverables from the straight away, whether it be acknowledging your schools on Kaurna country, you know, writing your email headers. You know, my community is the only Aboriginal community out there in the world that has native title of a capital city. So why aren't you acknowledging it? Why aren't you being the leader? Take out the word traditional owners and put in native title holders. That's a deliverable you can do straight away. And Australia Post allow you to change, you know, from number 1 Smith Street, Kaurna Country, North Adelaide. You know, we can do these sort of activities straight away. And just talk to us. We'll happily work with you. That's me. Night, Dahlia.
Well said.
Yeah, my name's Frank Wanganeen. I'm a Kaurna Naranga person, and I'm a cultural educator, and I really enjoy doing educating the wider community around the Kaurna culture and language, and particularly young kids. I go into schools, kindies, and even I've had little kindy kids coming up on the tour, and they're singing the Nina Māori song, and you know, so they at a young age they're learning like language and about Kaurna culture. So I think education's the way to go, to try and educate people about you know, culture in their own backyard, and people are starting sort of wanting to learn and you know, have a better understanding about culture, and it's about overcoming your fear, because a lot of people are still frightened to you know, talk to an Aboriginal person, because there's a lot of stigma around you know, the things back in their own minds that they have to sort of conquer. So yeah, I think education's the way to go, and you know, more people get educated and have a better understanding about Kaurna people and Aboriginal people in general. So.
Thank you very much. I also feel the same as you both. I think it's reconciliation for me is around truth telling. I think you need to have that as the foundation. We need to know the true history of this country. I think I also have a bit of a love-hate relationship with reconciliation, I think, because again, as you were saying, Uncle, it's more often than not Aboriginal people who are the storytellers and the ones in Reconciliation Week talking about our experiences and giving the kind of 101s of how to work with our mob and how you know, how to do culturally appropriate or culturally responsive kind of business. But again, I understand that's kind of what we need to do. It also plays into our natural ways of being and doing and living. You know, we are natural storytellers. We are natural, you know, sharers. We're also natural growlers. I think that's that's really important too, to kind of talk about that too. You both touched on not wanting people feeling like they don't want to do the wrong thing, and I think it's really important to kind of recognise that. But this is about reconciliation. You just have to kind of be brave, and you know, you might do the wrong thing, you might get growled, but that's okay. That's our way of learning too, you know. So I think that's really important. I guess the other thing that I want to talk about reconciliation, so like I mentioned, I'm a social worker and an artist. So I always like to bring kind of those themes of allyship into kind of people's journeys. I think it's really important to think of yourself as an ally if you're kind of coming along this journey of reconciliation. Anyone can be an ally. An ally is about using your privilege and your power to support other people that don't have that voice in whatever way you can do that. So I think that's really important. Probably that's the biggest takeaway for me, that I want people to know about reconciliation. If you don't think of yourself as an ally, why is that? So think about allyship, think about your allyship journey, think about your cultural learning journey, and again, listen to stories of our mob and our people and the multiple generations. Do that truth telling. But yeah, think about how you can then action that as an ally.
Coming from a young person's perspective, I think reconciliation is about celebrating our differences, especially coming from a school that's very multicultural. I think it should start reconciliation within schooling, because that's where you learn the most. I think it's about attempting to strengthen the relationship between Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal people, because that's when you can kind of make a difference. I think it's about accepting and comprehending the past while also establishing connection with others to build that trust with each other and also that respect as well.
Lovely.
Oh, thank you.
That's good. 50 years ago, in January 1972, a group of brave young men began the longest protest for Indigenous land rights, sovereignty and self-determination. They planted a beach umbrella and signage proclaiming the Aboriginal Embassy. That's being brave. That's attempting to make change. And that's what it's all about. We have to move in a different direction to just talking about it, raising flags or having conversations. It's what are you going to do as a student group? How are you going to influence your space? What are you going to do to influence the way teachers conduct themselves? And how are you going to be more inclusive? So stories of being brave. Have you got a story of you being brave? Tamaru, you talked about your desire to get your ancestral remains home to country in a respectful way. And what have you done in your journey that made you feel as though you were doing something substantial, something brave, you were making a change?
That's a pretty powerful question. I get emotional sometimes with some of the things that I do. You know, I'm mindful my father was whipped at school not to speak his language. My father wasn't allowed to drink out of the same tap as non-Aboriginal people. You know, I talk about my life and my life only. My father was a 22-year-old Aboriginal man that made love to a 17-year-old non-Aboriginal lady and produced me. And my white grandfather said to my dad, you either go to war or you go to jail. So my father joined the army, he went to Vietnam and he fought for his country that he couldn't even vote in. And so now I proudly teach my language at schools, and I listen to little beautiful non-Aboriginal kids speak my language with confidence, with pride, and it humbles me because I feel that I'm doing the wrong thing by asking to get paid for this thing when I'm sharing my culture. And to hear Aboriginal kids speak my language, to hear non-Aboriginal kids speak my language, I feel guilt asking for money to be paid, but I need to be mindful, I have to pay my mortgage. But the most powerful thing I've done lately is I'm teaching the Labor Party my language. And this month the Labor Party are going to use that language in Parliament House. Now how moving is that, and how humbling is it that for a society that hated Aboriginal people before and now going to speak my language in Parliament? And to me, I think that's brave, and I think it's a challenge that I really wish my father was there, because, you know, when it happens, I'm just going to be, I don't know, probably the same feeling I had when we were sitting in a room and the judge said we had native title. That was a big day too. Took us a long time to get it. So, you know, sharing language and listening to kids speak my language is humbling, and we teach about respect and saying Naitalia, thank you. You know, this year I had a Christmas card from a single mum of 3 kids, and she had 2 older daughters and a young boy that I teach at kindy, and this boy was punching his sisters and being really disrespectful to his sisters, but because this fellow learnt Naitalia and respect, he now takes the food from the stove and gives it to his sister at the table, and the mum was just so grateful for learning that side of my culture. And so, you know, these things make you put up with all the people that knock you, all the people that stab you in the back. all the people that think that, you know, oh, you drive a Merc, you make too much money, you're a white fella now. Well, some of us and most of us live in two worlds. I have my Aboriginal family say to me, are you white today, you're black today? I have my white family say to me, are you black today, you're white today? Well, I live in two worlds, and I'm proud of who I am. And I think one of my cheekiest comments I make to all kids at school, students, sorry young lady, is they say to me, oh uncle, why do you think you're Aboriginal, mate? You're not very black. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's a great question. Here, look, here's my cup of coffee. And if I pour lots of milk in this cup of coffee, is it a glass of milk or a cup of coffee? And they go, oh, coffee. I said, well, that's right. My dad's the coffee, my mum's the milk. You put them together, I'm still coffee, and proud of it. So, to answer your question, I think teaching our language in this modern world is the way to go about it, because what I love about students, and especially awesome young ones like this one, is if a non-Aboriginal fella learns our language, learns our culture, understands our people, you know, these kids today, they can be lawyers, premiers, judges, anything they want now. They've got the opportunity to do that. When something about an Aboriginal person crosses their table, they're not going to stick it in the too hard basket. They're going to deal with it. They're going to work it out. They're going to go, oh, I know Uncle Tamaru from school. Yeah, he was a good bloke. This bloke might be a good bloke too. Let's work with them. So this is what I love about my culture, what I love about trying to be brave, trying to stay at school and keep teaching it. You know, answering all the naysayers. Like I was at one of the largest private schools in this state with my auntie, who I look at as my mum, Auntie Lynette Crocker, and a teacher said to me in front of her, why do you think you're an elder? And my auntie just ripped her a new one and just educated her on about how we have emerging elders and how we have elders that have been around for a while that educate and share knowledge with us, and put her in her place. When actually now she's a really good friend of mine and I love working with her. She's a director of a kindy and we work closely, because I believe as friends, as educators and teachers, we should be able to have an argument. You know, I argue with my wife every day. Doesn't mean I love her any less, but we end up walking out on the same page. So being brave is sharing my culture when it wasn't wanted once. And I'm really looking forward to hearing Kaurna language spoken in Parliament House.
Thanks for that. Certainly example of being brave and prepared to make change. Many examples in that. So Sasha, putting the brush to the canvas, I always remember an old Aboriginal friend of mine who people kept asking what he was painting. He said, look, if I stand here and tell you what I'm going to paint, I'll never paint anything. So you've painted a lot of stories on canvas. What's your example of being brave and making change?
I think my story of bravery as well does incorporate my art. It also incorporates my education and the two worlds education, I think. I think that's really important. So I was the first person in my family on my mum's non-Aboriginal side and my dad's Aboriginal side to finish high school and first to go on to university in my family. And so I think that's really important that I had that education, but also acknowledging that that's not the only way to have an education. You know, my painting and my connecting to family, connecting to country, that is also just as much of an education for me. But I think the bravery is being able to walk in two worlds and be able to support the non-Aboriginal world to understand painting and art and history and do that truth-telling through that kind of way. Again, like I said, I'm a social worker, so I make sure that I involve a healing approach. So I think that's where kind of the bravery kind of comes in through my art and my work. If I didn't go to university, if I didn't study social work, I wouldn't be in the privileged position that I am now to be able to support our Aboriginal families. To heal from past traumas that we've kind of been through. You know, I work with a lot of stolen generation mums. I work with a lot of mums that haven't had their Aboriginal parenting practices valued. So I think it's really important to kind of talk about the ways that I do that through art and through healing and bringing our Aboriginal parenting practices and our strengths of culture, our strengths of parenting in. And I guess, like I said, the bravery kind of comes in by working in a kind of a white mainstream system, and constantly kind of having to push back on that system to educate people, I guess, about our parenting and about our ways, about the truth telling, and about how important it is to continue our healing journey. And we all be on that healing journey, non-Aboriginal and Aboriginal people. So yeah, I think that bravery comes in little acts every single day. I think there can be some really big, brave acts, but it's also in that constantly fighting the system and ensuring that our voices are heard, our voices are valued, and we continually stand up.
I might leave you till last, Frank, because you're one of the bosses. Khyeesha, what about yourself? Being brave, making change. You've obviously done that by being a leader in your school. It's an amazing achievement.
I think being brave to me is about telling your story. So for instance, last year I gave a speech to the school about racism, and specifically about my story with racism. And I think by me sharing my story, I think even though it was confronting, I think it did open the eyes for both students and teachers about what goes on in not just Aboriginal lives, but also in other people's lives as well, that what you say and what you do can actually affect others. And I think by telling my story and being brave to able to share that, I think it kind of opened up the topic about what else can be done within the school system to kind of rule out racism, and also to what else can be done to kind of prevent it from happening within a school setting and also within like a social and community setting as well.
And how did you get a reaction to that? Was it a positive one?
It was emotional. I did cry on the day, but I had a lot of teachers and students coming up to me afterwards to say that they were very empowered by my story, and that it was something that they were definitely going to look into, and that's kind of what I wanted to achieve. So having them be able to come up to me and kind of having that conversation was the main reason that I did the speech, and I'm grateful that I was able to get that message across.
How did you feel about becoming a leader?
A bit nervous, to be honest. I'm not going to lie, because it is something that I love doing. I love working with people and I love getting out in the community. So being able to kind of start that and be one of the leaders for that is very special to me, because I love speaking for others who may not have a voice yet. So being able to get their message across and being able to start that conversation for them is something that something that's very special to me.
Beautiful. Thank you. Now, Frank, you're a pretty brave character.
Oh.
Brave and making change. Where are the things that you believe you've done those things in your life?
Yeah, I think like the challenge for me is like trying to educate people, and I get people on my tours where they, particularly older people, and like they actually cry because they say to me, you know, we weren't taught anything about Aboriginal people, and you know, and just hearing those sort of things and think, well, you know, there's a lot that needs to be done, and education's, like I say, is the key, and seeing people like the teachers, you know, taking on those sort of leadership, even you, David, with your work that you do, you know, is inspiring, and I think to be brave, you've got to be courageous and go out and yeah, sort of challenge other people, but educate them, I think, is really important. I think education is key, you know, to be able to change perceptions that people have about Aboriginal people.
Beautiful. I think it comes back to Tamaru's point about bringing people along with you and getting that story across. So when students are thinking about this and they're talking with their teachers and their families, it's about bringing them along. So it's important to get your messaging right, to get some help with that from your student colleagues and from some of the people that are sitting here with me today. 30 years ago in June 1992, the 10-year fight of a group of Torres Strait Islanders led to Eddie Mabo over ownership of Mere on the Murray Islands, and it resulted in a High Court decision that recognised that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples have rights to land. Our point that was made about the Kaurna people being the native title holders, not just occupiers of that country. So it's important to recognise that those events occurred, and it's important for students to understand that history, as the points that people have made here today. Now, when we look at change...
Can I just say something quickly? Even though we in our minds we got native title, the Supreme Court judge didn't actually verbalise the words native title.
No, that's true.
She verbalised that it was consent of determination. So, in some people's minds, they're still oppressing us by not saying native title, but they are, on the other hand, acknowledging we were here first, and that's all we wanted, But it's funny, language is interesting, both our language and their language. It is.
Particularly the legal language.
Indeed, and that's a whole complete different language.
Complicated.
Yeah.
One of the things that is hard to comprehend is how politicians muck with all of this over the years. And there are some prime ministers who changed the whole course of this. We've had more promises of treaty than anybody, and we've never got a real start. So when young Australians are thinking about their contribution to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people going forward, what they should think about is, when you promise something, deliver. Don't talk about it, do something about it. This theme is actually being brave enough to bring about change. And we've all sat here and said that examples of traumatic events in people's lives never really been healed properly over time, and that's an important aspect of where we're going. My old auntie used to say to me, never ever go on the journey I went on, because we went on that journey. It's your job to take the story to a different place, and that's really what we're appealing to students about. Don't go on the same journey that your past ancestors and governments and politicians and school teachers went on. What you've got to do is bring about change and find a new direction. There's an old Aboriginal saying that says, when a non-Aboriginal person asks the Aboriginal elder, "Where's the path?" And the elder said, "There's no path. You have to make a new path." And that's really what you're talking about, getting people to make that new path. And the work you're doing in schools, your painting, Frank's tours, are all about creating that new path. And Charles Perkins once said, "Can't live in the past, but the past lives with us." So they're all pretty imposing signposts for being brave and also bringing about change. Okay, we've talked about being brave, bringing about change, talked about a bit of your own stories. What do we need to change?
Well, changing in my sphere of the educational path is that we teach these children language and we share language with them, but when the children take it home to the parents it's blah, blah, blah. And the parents are embarrassed they never learnt it at school. So what we're finding now is what language we teach, we need leaflets or pamphlets to go home with the children so they can share with the parents what they are. Because like Uncle Frank was saying, the kindy kids and the primary kids that I work with are now going home and teaching their siblings language and teaching their parents language. And so this is where, this is why yarning circles, the older people have hindsight. We need this to go home for the parents as well, because it's important for the parents to learn. But the other thing that I've noticed lately in my role as the co-chair of the Blackwood Reconciliation Group is it's not the school's right to teach Aboriginal kids about stolen generation. It's actually the parents' right to teach these kids. Because sometimes the schools teach about stolen gen, and the child might be second or third generation stolen child, goes home and talks about it with mum and dad. Well, mum and dad aren't dealing with it either. Or mum and dad it's very confronting to them. So our people need to teach our kids about stolen generation before a school inadvertently takes them to Colebrook or stolen generation site and teach about this. It's not their right. They're just crossing the line a little bit, and this is where, through reconciliation action plans at schools, once they get cultural awareness training, they know they shouldn't be doing this stuff. And this is why I love RAPs, because, you know, the Premier said a year ago that every government agency had to have a reconciliation action plan. So the flow-on effect is the Education Department, every school has to have one. So, you know, it's really great for the schools to embrace it and to learn about our culture and to teach it correctly. Like, I love listening to this one saying about truth-telling. That's right, TRT, we tell the truth. So long have students learnt Anglo-Aboriginal culture. They've learnt didgeridoo. Well, we say didgeridoo, it's a yidaki. Let's teach them the truth. And schools are finally embracing it, you know, and it's a really great time to be Aboriginal and be in schools and teach our culture at the moment, because they're immersing themselves with it, and students are loving it. You know, I don't see many kids these days that want to learn Indonesian or Chinese or Mandarin. They all want to learn Ghana, on Ghana country. And to hear them speak it, you know, when I walk into schools and hear kids keep coming up to me, Nina Mani, this is great. It's just humbling, but we've got to get them to answer it, because too many kids are asking us, are we good? But no one's answering each other. But it's baby steps. You've got to crawl before you can run.
Khyeesha, you're in a school. So what changes do you think young people need to make into the future?
Well, I think that it's great that you see a lot in the community and schools that they promote Reconciliation Week, but I think it also begins with actual actions being put into place. So it's great to see posters around and things like that, but I think for something to actually change, you actually need to put an action in place. It doesn't have to be small. It doesn't have to be big, sorry. It can be like a small push, because that can actually create a domino effect. But I think we just need to come as a group or a community to kind of put something in place rather than just saying it. I think something needs to be done.
Beautiful. Frank, what do you think needs to change?
Well, just basically people's attitude towards, you know, about Aboriginal people, and, you know, they still have that sort of mindset, or, you know, they're, you know, dirty and all these sort of negative sort of stereotypes. I think, yeah, sort of trying to, yeah, sort of break that cycle of negativity around, yeah, what people think about Aboriginal people and their culture.
What would you attempt to do to get that done? You do your tours, you do a lot of talking to people?
Yeah, well, it's education and just basically, you know, making them aware of, you know, the positive stuff that's sort of happening in our community, and because there's a lot of good people doing a lot of good things that, you know, that should be highlighted and more focused.
So in terms of your experience, Sasha, you worked as a social worker, you've worked doing your art. What, from your experiences, do you think needs to be changed?
I think lots needs to be changed, and I think it's really hard to hear that a lot needs to be changed. But I think it's really important, a part of that truth telling. You know, like you said, it starts from that bias and that stereotypes, and you know, that's really easy things to change through education and through talking and through a commitment to wanting to change and wanting to know better. Also, you were talking about some quotes. I really love the quote, sorry means that you don't do it again. And I think that is quite universal. I think it can be transferred to this as well. So once you know more, how do you not do more harm? I also think that young people and children and kids are the most influential group of people that you could ever talk to. I think our children are our future, absolutely, and they will make change for the next generations to come. because I think they don't come. We live in a world now that, you know, we are able to address bias and stereotypes and learn new ways, and, you know, kids are taking that on. So I think that's really, really important. I guess for me, though, the biggest part is not keeping it just in Reconciliation Week. I think it's really important. It's great that we've got so many initiatives. Yeah, we've got so much, you know, great people out there, like you said, in community and in schools, and doing art, and, you know, doing so much community events and networking and working amazing jobs. You know, we have so much strength in our culture. So how do we make sure that that moves past Reconciliation Week, 1 week, into every day? You know, I want to encourage, you know, the Aboriginal kids that are at school and the Torres Strait Islander kids that are at school, you know, keep going. You know, it's really hard. You might be facing racism, you might have stereotypes, you might have bias, you might have so much working against you, but, you know, this is your community, and this is what you know, the legacy that you'll be able to bring to it. And encourage non-Aboriginal kids as well to be able to, you are a part of this, you know, like we were all saying, change comes when we work together. It won't come with, you know, walking ahead or walking behind. It will only come when we're working together. So how do you be an ally? That's a really good question, I think, to ask yourselves. And we, as a panel, we don't have the answers for that, because that's really important that you look at yourself and look at your allyship, look at your bias, look at your stereotypes, look at how you were raised, look at the narratives that your school's giving you around Aboriginal people and Aboriginal culture. And if it's not good, then how do you change it? You know, we need people to be brave and make that change within themselves. We need schools to be brave and make that change within themselves. We have a wealth of knowledge and so many people that can support you on that journey. But ultimately, it's an individual and a school and a community opportunity to step up, really.
25 years ago, in April 1997, the report of the National Inquiry into the separation of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children from their families was released. It's a testament to the bravery of thousands who told of the impact of forcible removal from their families, cultures and communities. And that's what we're talking about when we talk being brave. Those people were extremely brave. Some of you have talked about some of the negativity that goes around. So when we've got young people like Khyeesha and other Aboriginal students in schools, with the young people that support them, or kids who are different from mainstream communities, how do they handle, or what advice would you give them, as well as handling it, what advice would you give them about managing negative responses to Aboriginal issues in their schools, or their support of Aboriginal people?
I think it was hard for me. I went to a private school, and, you know, I loved the school. I got a really good foundation at that school, absolutely. But there was definitely some racism there and some stereotypes. I remember, for me, being in year 10 and having an English teacher who was amazing. He ended up being really amazing, but would always, you know, come up to me, do you need some extra help? Do you need some extra help? What's going on for you? Like, and I just wasn't really sure. Like, I was thinking, why aren't any of the other kids in the class, you know, I was the only Aboriginal kid in the class, why aren't any other kids kind of getting this as well? And then she had some side conversations with me on the side, and it turned out that they had been labelling kids with special needs and who needed some other support, and kids with disabilities as the same as the Aboriginal kids. So that was just, you know, some of the small microaggressions, I guess, but in the system. So again, my Aboriginality is not a disability. My Aboriginality is not something that I needed extra support around. And then, yeah, we had a conversation, and when I kind of realised that this was again, it was again the emotional labour that Aboriginal people, and the expectation of me as a year 10 student to support this white teacher around what that looked like, and my experience being in her classroom, you know, thinking that I was less than, I guess. So yeah, for me, sorry, I've forgotten what what the question was, but yeah, for me, it's about that experience still lives with me and sits with me too. So yeah, how we can kind of change the system.
How did you handle it?
I think I went into myself, I'm a bit of an introvert, so, you know, but then going home to mum and dad, and then, you know, it's that extra layer of, I guess, innocence that gets taken away from Aboriginal kids so often in the school system, you know. I guess I see it at the moment with my kids as well, who are, you know, 9 and 5, kind of going through the system, and you see that the school system sometimes isn't set up for Aboriginal kids. You know, my son especially is very outward and, you know, he doesn't like to sit in the classroom. Again, because that is our ways, and that's how I parented him as well. That's my Aboriginal parenting ways. You know, we get out there, we have lots of big yarns, and we learn in different experiential ways as opposed to kind of sitting in a classroom. But ultimately, it's not doing him well at the moment in a mainstream school system. So I suppose I don't deal with it very well. I think I come in as a very strong, fiery mother, and I guess I've kind of learnt that from not dealing with it well. I guess when I was a teenager, going really insular and kind of feeling a bit shame about myself, and unfortunately, that's kind of an experience that you take on. Yeah, it's hard to see pride and to see that in yourself sometimes when everyone else kind of sees you as that stereotype and that bias, and, you know, not going to do well at school. So I guess I implore teachers to really understand who people are, who your students are, what your students need, and to really understand what Aboriginal ways of education are and how you can incorporate that into the mainstream school system.
That's good. What about, though, I'm a non-Aboriginal student in a school. I want to support being brave. I want to support bringing about change. I want to talk to people who may not hold the same passion that I do. What tools can that student bring to the table that's going to help them express their view and try and get people around the table to understand our point of view? So I'm talking not necessarily about us as Aboriginal people, I'm talking about what advice, because we're not talking here to a majority of Aboriginal students sitting there, there's many, many students from different cultural backgrounds, but how do they tool up, using a tradesman's term, how do they tool up to be able to put this all together and be able to come forward and support Aboriginal people, even though they've got a negative or indifferent view from their compatriots? I might turn to you, Khyeesha, you might be able to.
I think it's all about speaking up and standing out, like in the sense of you're not really gonna learn anything if you don't put in the work yourself. So I think it's always good to constantly, like you said before, constantly ask questions, come up to us, have a conversation, because that's probably the best way to learn, is learning from someone who is from that background. I think it's also about doing your own research as well, seeing what you can do to make a difference, and how you can support others as well.
Beautiful. Tamaru, you go into schools, you talk to lots of people, and we were talking before about some of your experiences. How do you work with those non-Aboriginal students to be able to get them to do what we're saying in Reconciliation Week 2022, be brave, try and bring about change, even though you've got a lot of negative forces around you?
I encourage schools to do environmental leaders and look at bush tucker and plantings of plants, how Aboriginal people used to manage country. You know, we talk about fire stick farming, we talk about our native foods. So I like pies, and I also do pie charts with schools. And most times in a garden, I will do a normal tomato plant and I'll do a bush tomato plant. And I'll give it a litre of water for your tomato plant and a litre of water for bush tomato plant. And we see how much water is needed to make that tree grow and produce fruit. So the normal tomato plant will need 2 litres of water to grow 6 tomatoes full of water, whereas a bush tomato plant will grow 12 tomatoes, we only need half a litre of water. So which would you grow? Let's look at why Aboriginal people have native foods and why it's better. Our food's full of flavour and small, your food's full of water. So let's look at the environmental aspects. You know, we're the oldest known culture on the planet. You'd think we'd know how to look after country. So through the STEM progress and the HAS programs at schools, this is how we encourage non-Aboriginal people to bring their perspective on how to manage country and our perspective. And most times what I do is I get some of the non-Aboriginal kids to take a tube stock of whether it be knobby clubrush, ruby saltbush or whatever, to take it home, and they grow it in their own yard. So they take ownership. And once they take ownership, you know, it really happens, and then they immerse ourselves in all other aspects of our culture. It's I think in the, you know, the English people, they unpack it. It's about reverse psychology. If you make it their idea, they'll make it happen. And most times with schools, they love it. They love bush tucker, you know. Go on with the days where we have planter boxes. Now we have interactive gardens where we graze on our way and sit down and eat it. Most times I do an Aboriginal entrance and a non-Aboriginal exit or entrance, and they have their product at their end and my product on our end, and we sit and we eat. And you know, when we eat, we talk and we learn about things. So I encourage most schools that I work with to do a bush tucker garden, you know. So, and it works really well. We have edible foods, we have medicine plants, we have plants for the bird life, we have plants for ground-dwelling animals. And it's great. You can, you know, hang bananas in kindies and butterflies will come. We can have ruby red salt bushes everywhere where the red berries candy to kids. We can have ruby yellow where we give our non-Aboriginal fellas the ruby yellow, and in half an hour they get diarrhea because it cleanses their insides. So it's all about engaging all aspects of our knowledge. And it's, you know, I myself cook fish in the ground in clay. And we cook a whole fish in clay, wrap it like a pasty, whack it with a stick. The clay peels automatically the skin off the fish, so it descales fish, leaves steamed meat there. Well, we've been cooking like that for years. Why aren't you cooking it? You know, I find in the educational space that a lot of non-Aboriginal people, we can articulate how to do it, but they just don't get it. We need to show them how to do it. And once you show them how to do it, they immerse themselves in the culture. So it's you know, that's the way I like to get in there with them.
Yeah. Now, Frank, what would you advise students to do who might be wanting to support the cause of Aboriginal people but are confronted with negative views around them? How would you tell them to handle that?
Yeah, I think just seek out other people that you know that have that sort of experience, you know, around conflict, and just challenge them. I think it's one way of sort of bringing about change. I think, you know, to be outspoken and trying to sort of get other people involved. I think it's a way to go and try and have a support behind them, support mechanism behind them, so they can sort of you know, continue on advocating for change.
That's a good comment. Now, in terms of the reconciliation process, we've had a good conversation. We've talked around a number of topics. What would be your final advice to students who are watching?
I think being a champion of change.
Mm-hmm.
I agree, going on that allyship journey and making sure that you know what that means, and continuing that journey. Also, it's really easy to do a cultural audit of your school. You know, have a look at, do you have the Aboriginal flag? Are you doing acknowledgements of country? What are you doing to support the Aboriginal community, the local community and your students? It's really easy to do a cultural audit and you know, implement some really actionable change from there.
Definitely encourage every school to get a reconciliation action plan on how to engage and work with Aboriginal people side by side. It's the way to go. It's the way of the future.
I think it's just about starting the conversation, because I think that's where real change starts. Starting the conversation, see what you can do in your community, and kind of coming together as one to create change.
Well, that's an important conversation that we've had today, and I hope students have gained some insight from our guests. Reconciliation is an ongoing journey that reminds us that while generations of Australians fought hard for meaningful changes like these that we've talked about today, future gains are likely to take just as much time and effort, if not more effort. What I'm encouraging you to do today is to not just listen, but be part of the conversation. Because listening can just mean that you're neutral, but if you're part of the conversation, you're engaged in supporting us. So thanks for being with us. Thanks to our guests this morning and our panel, and let's hope there's real change in the wind. Thank you.
Dalia.